Good evening, everyone. I'm Royal Ailes, and welcome to Oklahoma Votes 2022 Republican Primary Candidates Forum, hosted by RSU Public TV and KGOU Radio in Norman. I'm the moderator for tonight's forum, and we're coming to you from RSU TV studio on the campus of Rogers State in Claremore. And this is the first of two forums we are hosting for the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. RSU TV and KGOU are working together to bring you this Republican forum so you can be an informed voter when you go to the polls on the 28th for the primary election. This Republican primary has four candidates, and they are, by random, John Cox, Superintendent of Public Schools in Peggs for that school district in Cherokee County. April Grace, Superintendent of Shawnee Public Schools District in Shawnee, Oklahoma. Ryan Walters, currently serving as Oklahoma's Secretary of Education, appointed by Governor Kevin Stitt. And William Crozier, retired veteran from Union City, Oklahoma. Now, each candidate will be given 60 seconds with an opening statement and 60 seconds to answer the questions, and then 90 seconds for a closing statement. We have a timekeeper on the floor, so all the candidates will need to pay attention to that young man standing right over there, and he will signal to you on how much time you have left in your 60 seconds. Now, I ask each one of you to please watch the time clock closely or I will cut you off. We don't want that to happen. Our panelists of journalists who are asking all those important questions are Jeannie Graham, from the editorial editor of the Tulsa World, Logan Layden, news managing editor of Public Radio State Impact, and Dwayne Smoot, a freelance journalist who just retired from the Muskogee Phoenix. Good luck to you, Dwayne, out there in retirement land. Candidates, since this is a question and answer forum, any rebuttal will have to come out of your time of answering the next question. We will follow the time limits closely to be fair, and I will interrupt you only as needed. As the moderator, I reserve the right to ask a follow-up question if needed, or necessarily to ask for clarification to your answer. And if I feel you're really off the mark, I'll try to bring you back on to answer the question. I respectfully ask that there be no interaction between the candidates, no personal attack toward any opponent, and no interruption. So please, let's all conduct ourselves professionally. So, everyone was allowed guests in the studio, but no guests are here, so we don't have that to worry about. So let's get started, shall we? So the way we're going to get this thing kicked off is asking for opening statements. And our first opening statement goes to April Grace.
Hi, my name is April Grace, and I have been an educator for over 33 years. I spent 12 years in a classroom, 7 years in building level leadership, and 8 years as an assistant superintendent and 6 years as superintendent. I'm also a mother and a grandmother, which is my favorite title, and I'm running for state superintendent because I think it's time that we reimagine, redesign, and redefine Oklahoma education. Thank you.
Second one is Bill Crozier.
Thank you very much. I've been in all kinds of different educational institutions, Army, military, civilian, federal government, state government, and local government. So my plan was 10 years ago to make the changes that we needed to do now, which didn't happen for whatever reasons. So I plan on doing that. Originally, I wrote a plan in 1975 to overhaul the Oklahoma educational system, and the Democrat state legislature passed a law against it and took them 5 years to figure out they couldn't read it. So there are a lot of things that need to be done. We can do them together. All my opponents, I'll say good things about them, are all definitely qualified. Me, everybody is for progress, but nobody's for change.
Ryan Walters.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. I think it is urgent that we fix our schools. I think the far left has pushed their policies in our schools for far too long. It's time to put parents in charge of their kids' education. I'm not going to allow our schools to go woke. We're not going to have critical race theory in our schools. We're not going to have the transgender education in our schools. We're going to focus on high expectations, on academic standards, and I'm going to be a champion for parents. I believe nobody knows better for their kids than their mom and their dad. So I want to make sure parents have choice and parents are empowered in their kids' education. I also want to ensure that every teacher has the ability to be successful in their classrooms. So I want to have the highest quality teacher in the classroom, and I want to make sure that those teachers have the support necessary. It is essential that we fix our schools so that our kids can have the best opportunity for success. That's what I'll fight for, and that's what I want to do for all Oklahoma students, is to make their education as good as it can be.
Mr. Cox.
Yes, I am so proud to be here today to represent our public schools across the state. John Cox, I'm This is my 36 years in public education, first 8 years as a teacher, coach, math teacher, and then the last 28 years as a school superintendent. So I've been through the ups and downs of our economy, and I know I can step in there the first day and make great decisions for the best of our children. So this is a vital election for our kids across the state. $3.2 billion go through the education department. And we need somebody in there that's advanced in public school finance, that can handle things, that can know the economic downturns and how to best take care of our children. So I've been going across the state talking about safety and how to keep our schools safe and really get back to the basics again. So I appreciate being here at this forum, and thank you.
All right. Well, now you've heard their opening statements. Now you're going to hear the answers to the questions. And to start off is Jeannie with the Tulsa World. Jeannie?
Hi. The State Department of Education is one of the largest agencies in the state. As you said, $3.2 billion goes through there. A lot of it is passed through to the local districts. But can you tell us, what is the biggest budget you have directly overseen? What is the largest staff you have directly managed? And how has that prepared you for the job that you are seeking?
April, you start off.
So the current budget that I oversee is $32 million. And I have a staff of 550. And so that's the size of the staff that I've managed. I've been a part as assistant superintendent of a $135 million budget, as well as we had about 2,300 full-time employees. So as assistant superintendent of HR, I had to navigate those things. And as you know, it's a very complex system. And so those are the experiences I bring to the table. In both of those districts, I've been a part of helping raise fund balance from 2% to about 14%. So being able to be creative with personnel and knowing how to navigate challenging times financially.
Ryan?
So I oversee a nonprofit, and so I manage a budget there at the nonprofit. And as Cabinet Secretary for Governor Kevin Stitt, I've been the Secretary of Education. I've been digging into the finances at the State Department of Education, which is why the governor and I called for an audit of the State Department, the first audit in state history of that department. That department needs to do a better job of ensuring resources are getting to the classroom, getting to our kids, getting to our teachers so that they can be used in our kids' education. So as I've begun to look into government agencies, I've seen funds that are not being spent as efficiently as possible. And we need someone in this role who is willing to go into a huge bureaucracy, make the cuts necessary, and ensure that all of this spending is used to the betterment of our kids. And frankly, we've got too much government. We have too much bureaucracy. We need to get more money to the classroom where our kids' learning is going on.
John?
So at a small rural school that I'm at, I oversee 40 employees. And I think that brings value to what I bring to the State Department, because in that capacity, we wear many hats. All of us do at that school system. And so I know everything from child nutrition, special ed, transportation, federal programs, every aspect that you have in public education, I know. So I bring value when I come to the State Department, because I know the mandates that have been brought on us, and that we can help alleviate some of the burden that's on the schools. But I think that is important. And also, I serve as chairman of a board that's over 500 schools that takes care of workman's comp. I'm treasurer of a insurance board that has over $20 billion worth of property that we insure. And that includes 541 schools. So people across the state trust me, and they love the service that I give to them.
Bill?
Mine's a little bit different because I work for state government, national government, and local government. Local government, I was Director of Safety and Civil Defense for the city of Norman for a couple of years, so we made it a lot safer. They finally built the overpasses they needed to. And when I went to work for the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, that's the old money before the inflation we're having now, so that's equivalent to 15 or 20 million on road repairs for 5 years. Went to work for Tinker Air Force Base, which was with airplanes, and bought contracts for them. So that's the same school. The last one we had at Tinker was the same one that's taught at American University and George Washington. I don't know which one's changing their name, but one of them is. So I've been able to look at all these, done different audits and stuff, and my personal experience has been I had to go over a few times to talk to the OSBI about people stealing money, and the FBI, and they took them out.
Okay. Logan, you're next, and this question will start off with Ryan.
Very good. Governor Kevin Stitt has said he wants the state superintendent position, the one you're running for, to be appointed rather than elected. Do you share that view?
I think it's absolutely great that we have this election where we get to hear from voters. We get to have, as Oklahomans, a voice into who runs this department and to where education should go. As I travel around the state, I hear from parents, I hear from teachers that are very frustrated with the system as it's been run. So I think this gives Oklahomans a great opportunity to speak into the direction of the state, specifically when it comes to education. So I am very pleased that I get the opportunity to meet folks from all over the state and try to see what the future can look like for our kids and compile a vision that will put every single child in the best opportunity for them to be successful. That's what I hear from parents. Parents want us to lead in education, and it's not because of the ranking. What parents want is parents want to know when they drop their kid off at school, their kid's getting the best possible education. This election gives all Oklahoma parents, all Oklahoma teachers the opportunity to speak into this role and speak into the future of education in the state of Oklahoma.
John?
I think Oklahoma stated it very clear 2 or 3 years ago that we don't want an appointed state superintendent, and I absolutely agree with that, because that gives voice to what I can bring there for the people. I think if we have one man that's appointing to the state superintendent and has complete control of the State Board of Education, then it goes directly into that person's view and into their philosophy. So being an elected state superintendent actually will bring power to the people in the state. So absolutely I'm against that. I have been advocating, though, if there is a change, that we actually elect the state board members in the congressional districts and allow those board members to actually hire a state superintendent.
Bill?
Well, one of the things we looked at that was in that paper when California was not in disrepute back in the 70s was do a University of Oklahoma system, which meant not just the school, but it meant all of them, where you could keep track of all the money they spent, the grants they spent, and connect it and not try to duplicate things. Most students go to school that's close to where they are. So that was one of the things we looked at. We also, with my dad's help, because he was being chairman of political science at University of Central Oklahoma, could look the Capitol from the hill in there in Edmond. People would come and tell him what he needed to do, and we sort of created Ryan's job. The idea was that we would have a Secretary of Education that would be like the U.S. one over all of them and could coordinate different kinds of audits and other types of activities that were necessary. So I favor having that job, whether it's elected or not. I'll leave that up to the legislature. We need to have one person in charge. I mean, we have kind of a progressive, populist type government, and we have too many people we elect.
All right. April?
I think Oklahomans want to elect this position, so I am absolutely for it being an elected position, not an appointed position. It was set forth that way in the Constitution of our state. And what I hear across the state is in our local communities, folks are supportive of their local community public schools and their teachers and educators. They are supportive of those, and they feel good about those, and they feel good about their local community school. Sometimes what they aren't sure about is the school across the street or the school across the state, but in their local communities, they are supportive of their local community public schools. And so I'm for this position being elected. I believe it gives voice to the people of Oklahoma, and that's how it should stay.
Dwayne?
In 2018, the state received a school climate transformation grant. New data released recently show that 50 schools participating in this program have realized a 56% reduction in office discipline referrals and a 31% reduction in school suspensions. What can you tell us about this program, and is this something that you would try to continue as superintendent after the grant expires?
John?
I'm not familiar with this grant, and of course I've been in this a while now, so I haven't heard of that grant, but it seems pretty promising. Anything that we can do in the classroom to help with student behavior is vital, and that's one of the things I'm hearing across the state is actually we can't control certain kids and they're disruptive, and a lot of teachers are leaving the profession because the discipline's not being taken care of. So I think any focus that we can put in that area is vital to what we're doing. At our school, you know, we have an advantage because we know the parents and grandparents, and we're able to work and have relationships with them, and that's probably more important than anything. But I'm open to any ideas that would help with classroom management and behavior issues.
Bill?
What I would do usually is like I did when I did accident investigations, was to interview everybody and find out exactly if they have a problem of some kind, because that's usually why it caused class disruptions. So that part needs to change. Going up in a little town, Minco, not too far from Norman, 35 miles. I didn't know I was a hick till I got there. So I had to go read Emily Post and Amy Vanderbilt and figure out what type of manners people should have, and it worked, I think. I'm still working on it. But I think that's probably what we need to do, and let the students know what is demanded of them. The thing I like best about classrooms, or when you work with special ed or any type of students, is that you let them know that they're good at what they do, and you have expectations, and they usually exceed the expectations. That's what we want to do. We don't want to make Oklahoma just the best school in this part of the world, but in the whole country.
April.
Sure. So part of what this grant does is provide training and support for school staff. It uses often positive behavior intervention systems, which is a way to help address student needs. It helps sort of re-gauge students and help them understand. So part of when we talk about discipline in schools, part of approaching discipline is trying to change behavior. So not just sending a student home, but we're trying to kind of reestablish what they should be doing in school and how they should be acting in a classroom, et cetera. So this particular grant provides training and support for teachers, and part of what we'd want to keep doing is providing this training and support. Teachers need resources and support, and we know that when we can keep classroom discipline down, that it does matter for teachers and it matters for teacher retention.
Ryan?
You know, I hear this all over the state, that classroom discipline's out of control, that administrators aren't supporting their teachers so that they can teach their classes. There's all kind of behavioral problems. What we have to do is we have to set a culture of high expectations in our school. That means with academics, but it also means with student behavior. Students should come into school ready to learn. They should not be disruptive in the classrooms. And this is one of the issues of keeping our good teachers. Our teachers want to make a difference in kids' lives. And if we don't have discipline in our schools, our teachers will not be able to deliver their lessons that they've planned, that they've all got prepared for our students. So we've got to have administrators support our teachers, make sure that school discipline is under control, and make sure that teachers can do what they're there to do, make those difference in our kids' lives.
All right, back to Jeannie.
This is somewhat related. Healthy Minds Oklahoma has used the term that we have a youth suicide epidemic, that right now our children are in crisis. And this is backed up by other youth advocacy groups that have been putting up the red flags that our kids are coming to school often and they're in crisis. So what can you do as state superintendent in policy to try to help these children, try to help the families, because their mental health has a direct effect on academic outcomes?
Bill.
Teaching in different schools, especially in Oklahoma City, even though they promised me jobs all the time, they didn't follow through with it. So I had kids in my classes didn't have any homes. They were staying with their friends. So a lot of the families, I think, are in crisis. So in sociology, we used to study what anomie was, which was in a free society, young people and sometimes older people are alienated. That's why people still jump off the Empire State Building, or the one in Paris, they like it to the Eiffel Tower. So it still needs to be an interview process. And even though I don't like communist quotes, I like Khrushchev always said at the Battle of Stalingrad, and of course if the Nazis would have won, I've been speaking German and wouldn't been any Jews around, is to give them hope. They got to have hope. Look for something down the future. Try to write it down. Try to aim your objectives of what you need to do and go after them. If they don't know, help lead them in the right path and prepare them to go on to whatever they want to do.
April?
Sure. We know that we have a large percentage of our students that have what we call ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and so we know that trauma is directly impacting our classrooms. So when we partner with the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health to have grants, so in my school district we have those, and it's to help provide wraparound services to our students and families. We need to make sure that we are providing that access and opportunity point for some families. Some families we know can go get this care on their own, but for many of them, when we talk about 60% of the students in this state live in poverty, the access point and opportunity is within our schools. And so providing these wraparound services in our schools is extremely important. So we have to keep doing that. We also have social workers provided in a partnership with the Department of Human Services as well. And so these are partnerships that schools can do. So as state superintendent, I would continue to seek those partnerships for our schools and make sure we're providing those services.
Ryan.
One of the things we have to make sure is parents know best for their kids, and schools shouldn't be trying to be the parents. The government is not the kids' parents. The parents are. Parents need to be empowered. Parents need to know what's going on in the schools. Parents need to be brought into the process. earlier and more often so that those partnerships between parents and school officials work really well together. Several things that did not help our mental health crisis for our kids. Shutting down schools did not help our kids' mental health. And Tulsa Public Schools kept their schools shut down for almost an entire calendar year. I was out publicly telling them to open their schools, make sure every kid has an opportunity there to have those in-classroom experiences with their teachers. The Biden administration pushing all this nonsense in schools, incredibly inappropriate sexual conversations going on in young age groups, is inappropriate. All of these concepts about telling students that they're victims in early grade levels, all this does is further damage kids' mental health. What kids need to know is they need to be empowered to follow their dreams. They need to have the academic structure to be successful, and their parents need to be brought into that conversation every time.
John.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a mental health crisis, and I think it's brought through isolation and it brought about depression and anxiety in our children, and we see that. And bringing them back from the pandemic and really trying to get back to some normalcy at school was extremely important this year. And that's something we did at our school. We left it up to the parents to make their choice of mask, and we put that back in their hands. But I think it's correct to say that the school has to have a great relationship between the parent and the counselor, and that they work together with the child. And that's something that we have. The Counselor Corps grant that we're involved in that just came about, I think that's extremely important to extend. And if we can make it where it's actually a grant that isolates on children that need it, and when parents call, we can use that grant for that, I'm all for that. So that will be a focus that I bring to the table when I'm as state superintendent.
Dwayne.
Could you tell us, as our education system is subject to federal mandates and state mandates, and some funded and some not. As state superintendent, how would you navigate these various mandates that ensures or maximizes local control of our school districts?
Oh, I'm sorry, April.
Well, I think absolutely we have to make sure that local control is a priority. So obviously at the State Department of Education, you are somewhat of an accountability agency and overseeing and making sure that we're doing the right things as well. So, but I do think it's extremely important that we provide as much flexibility as there's an opportunity to provide for local control. Within the local school district, they have the best opportunity to best meet the needs of their students at the closest to the problem or to the closest to the issue. So we've got to make sure we're in compliance from a legal perspective. We don't want to have a federal audit that creates problem or giving funds back or any of those issues, and we don't want to be breaking any state laws. So we do have to provide that compliance and accountability. But at the same time, with as much opportunity as possible, we must let the local school districts navigate those things with locally elected officials and within the local community.
Ryan?
The far left is obsessed with controlling our schools and controlling our kids' education. Federal money, the governor and I, we called for the audit of the State Department of Education, and one of the specific requests we made was to see all of the requirements with federal money. We need to take a look at this. As Oklahomans, do we want Joe Biden dictating what we're doing in our schools? Biden administration wants critical race theory in our schools. Oklahomans don't want that in our schools. Joe Biden wants transgender theory being taught in the earliest grade levels, kindergarten and beyond. Oklahomans don't want that in their schools either. We shouldn't be taking this federal money and indoctrinating our kids with the most far-left woke ideology in the country coming out of Washington, D.C. That 10th Amendment says that if the powers aren't given over to the federal government, they are reserved for the states. Oklahomans should determine what their education system look like. Our schools should be reflective of our communities and our values, our conservative values that believe every child is capable of success. That's the way our schools should look, and we need to get the feds out of our education system.
John?
As I mentioned earlier, I'm actively involved in our federal grants and bringing them into our school. And so there's two grants that actually there's no strings tied to it, except, and one of those is our E-rate money that we bring in that actually pays for the internet and technology that we have. And as long as we follow those rules, we're good with that. And then Impact Aid, which is in lieu of the taxes that we have. That money can be used in any area that we can see fit to educate a child. There's no strings attached to that. But what I try to do when we look at federal programs is fit it to what we do and not put strings attached. So I use a lot of our federal money specifically for employees and to be able to do it that way. The Counselor Corps grant that I mentioned, at some point we have to take a look at that because I don't want indoctrination of a Counselor Corps grant into our schools, but I want it used for the purpose that it should, and that's to help a child.
Bill?
Well, one of the great things that happened to me when I was running for Congress in '72, which worked out later better, was that Richard Nixon decided to make the U.S. Department of Education a cabinet level position. Later he regretted it. People who study political science know that you can brainwash kids. The Nazis did it. You can brainwash kids. The Soviets did it. And we brainwash our kids in democracy, if you want to look at it that way. The idea is to be able to know what's going on and what they can do the best and think for themselves. So my opinion would be, and I've done it small places before, but I think I could do it on the big one. I think we need to have our tax credits for our own Department of Education, elect the people, school boards, how we want to, come up with what our values are. If it's pornography, get rid of it. That needs to be our objective, and we want to get rid of those bad things that we can and bring it back to the local level where it belongs with Oklahoma attitudes.
All right, Jeannie, you're up next. Or Logan, you're up next.
Sure. School safety is obviously an important issue right now. What is your comfort level with putting firearms in the hands of teachers in Oklahoma? And would you be comfortable with your own children's teachers having a gun in the classroom?
Ryan.
Yeah, I've been very on the record about this. I absolutely believe that if staff want to carry on school premises, they absolutely should. The best defense of a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And so we should absolutely be ensuring that our Second Amendment rights are there in place on our schools. There's a reason why these evil individuals have targeted schools. They're gun-free zones. If there's not a guard there, or there's not staff that's carrying, that's been trained, and they don't have one of those big signs out front that says that some staff are armed on campus, evil people will target the most innocent in our society. We cannot allow this to happen to our kids. So we have to ensure that on school property, there is a good guy with a gun, and they need to know that in the state of Oklahoma, you are not going to target our kids. Your kids will be safe when they're in school, and any type of evil that comes that way will be met with lethal force. Any evil individual needs to hear that message loud and clear in the state of Oklahoma.
John?
Yeah, I've been talking about this issue all over the state, and so what we figured is if we could put a security guard at the entrance of every school site, that's 1,776 school sites across the state, at approximately 50,000, that'd be right around $90 million. And as we've heard, there's going to be about $3.2 billion in the rainy day fund, and I just see where we can use part of that money to keep our kids safe. And yesterday, the group I talked to, the most important thing they said was, how can we keep our kids safe? And coming into August, when we come back, what can we do then? Because there's going to be high anxiety when our kids come back. So I want to put a security guard at every site, and they need to be well trained. And also, if you have employees, not school teachers, I think that sent the wrong message, but school employees who feel comfortable and have that security guard training that they can carry, I think that's extremely important to have at our rural schools especially.
Bill?
Well, having taught in prisons for 10 years, people would always ask me, why are you teaching in a prison? I said, well, it's hard to break in as well as hard to break out. So a lot of our people at the private prisons were not allowed to have guns and stuff because inmates usually take them away. We need to do something similar, though, is when it comes to metal type of things being brought into school, whether it's a sword, machete, machine gun, pistol, and having some relation with that indirectly. When I was in the Oklahoma National Guard, Patrick Shelley took my place in security police, shot up the post office in Edmond in '86. A couple of people survived, and he didn't use private guns that had registration on them. He used the state guns, and that's happened before. So we don't need to really have the guns in everybody's hands. The guns are so easy to use. This is my personal reasons, though, of course. You can shoot people easily. If we were already here and I had one with me, I could get all of you. Even though we didn't have any guns when I was growing up, I do qualify expert. So we need to do that. Also, there are things on computers that we could do to keep track of people.
All right, let's move on to the next question. Dwayne? Oh, I'm sorry, my fault.
We already have in law right now where local school districts can do this and they can arm individuals. So again, I'll go back to saying that I think this is a locally elected officials, local school boards who make this determination. We do have some school districts across our state where there are employees carrying because they are 30, 40 minutes away from law enforcement. And this makes sense in those places that those people be trained and be allowed to have carry on site. So again, locally elected officials are best to make this decision. They're the closest in proximity to the issue. Security vestibules, most schools have been installing those. We need to continue with that. I have no objection to continuing to try to pursue funds to get more security officers and police officers on campus. I think that's also critical. But again, I'll go back to these should be locally elected officials making these decisions for their local community public school.
All right, Dwayne.
There's a kind of a tug of war between public schools and private schools and school choice, and I would like to explain or give me a good reason why public funds should be used for private education or the students enrolled at private schools.
John.
So I think there's a great relationship between public schools and private schools and even homeschool. And so I don't really see that as a conflict between them. I know all throughout the rural areas and basically all across the state, homeschool parents say they don't want government money because they don't want government strings attached to it. And same with private schools. So as state superintendent, I'm in control of 95% of the students across the state, and we should keep that money in public schools to fix our schools, make them better, give them resources. So it's not really the question of school choice. I love school choice, but it's who's going to pay for it. And for the majority of the state, they're saying we don't want government money. We don't want government money in private areas. So I think it's really important to say that. But you know, I'm for all of our kids, 100% of them being able to have the opportunity to choose and go where they want to go.
Bill?
Well, when I was growing up, we had a lot of the kids from the Catholic schools across the river from us come and join our public school. Many public schools need to keep all the money they have. Don't lower their FTE if they lose students, if they get more students added in. And we had something called quality jobs at the Oklahoma Tax Commission. That would be to be tax benefits for the people who go to private schools. If they just can't put up with them, especially in the urban area, then they're going to tax credit for it, and they don't have to pay for all of it out of their own pocket since the inflation is so bad as it is. There are things that we can do that are more creative. They can't exist side by side. And of course, I always tell people, you know, private schools and public schools, the names are opposite in England. Churchill went to a public school, which is really a private school, and a private school is really a public school. So I thought I'd teach you all that.
Okay, April?
I absolutely support a parent's right to make that educational opportunity choice for their child. We already in Oklahoma have, through policy and funding, a lot of school choice. We have the opportunity for Lindsay Nicole Henry Scholarship and the Opportunity Scholarship, in which folks can apply for those scholarships to attend private schools. So we already have those options available for families. We also have public school charters, virtual charters, and we have our traditional public schools as well, and we have homeschooling. We have the most liberal homeschooling policies and laws in the nation, which is great because there's complete freedom for those parents. And so I support those things, but what I find when I travel across the state is that Oklahomans want accountability and transparency on public funds. So when we talk about public funds going to private institutions where now there's no accountability and transparency, that's a problem for Oklahoma taxpayers. And so for that reason, I would not support those funds going that way without those strings attached to them.
Ryan?
I believe with all my heart that every single child can be successful. I believe that if put in the right situation, with the right teacher, with their right drives, every child can achieve their dreams. That's why I am passionately a believer in school choice. I think that nobody knows best for their kid than their mom and their dad. Their mom and their dad need to have as many options in educating their child as possible. So I want every parent in the state to be able to determine what their kid's education system looks like, what their kid's education looks like in general, whether that's attending this school or that school, whether it's attending a school where they're looking at college classes or career tech classes, or maybe they're doing externships or internships. I think parents need to be in the driver's seat of their kids' education. So more options for parents is good. More options for parents will put more children in opportunities to be successful. And I think that's absolutely what we should be doing as a state, doing all that we can to ensure every child is in a classroom with a great teacher who's got the resources to be successful, and we can do great things in education in Oklahoma.
So let me follow up on that answer. You talk about equality and equitable. It's not equitable. So how do you make it equitable? Because if you live in Delaware County, you can't afford a private school. So how do you make it equitable?
You make it equitable by giving people options. Right now, what we're doing is saying we're going to let the government choose where you go to school and what your options are. I want to let the parent choose. My daughter attends a public school. I've only taught in a public school. I love the public school my daughter is at. We have so many amazing public schools across the state. But I want to make sure that we are using every opportunity to give kids pathways to success. And this is one. And there's a lot we need to be doing. We've got to be supporting our teachers. We've got to make sure our teachers are supported inside the schools. But this is just another option that some parents can use to make sure that their kid is getting that education. And I talk to parents every week that, again, it might be a public school to another public school. It might be a public school to a private school. It might be a virtual school. I mean, I hear these all the time, but I hear parents that are passionate about what's going to work best for their kids. And I'm not going to pretend to know what's best for everybody's kid. Nobody knows my kids better or loves my kids more than me and my wife. Just like all these parents at home and all the grandparents. They know best for their kids, so I'm going to put my faith in them, and I'm going to empower them in their kids' education.
Anybody else want to jump in there? No takers? All right, let's go to the next question.
Okay, in 2011, Oklahoma had 32 emergency certifications for teachers. These are untrained, new teachers, inexperienced, and it was rare. Now we have over 3,800 emergency certified teachers in classrooms. We have far more resignations and retirements than we have teachers coming in, and frankly, people aren't going into education. So what do you do as state superintendent to keep our experienced teachers and to turn that around?
John? Am I out of order?
Well, I
Bill,
think we'll.
go for it.
Well, that's always been a problem on giving teacher certification to people in your local small school district who doesn't really have any training but might have a degree. So having gone to the educational school at the University of Oklahoma, also UCO, I think we can hire people and they can learn to be teachers while they're teaching. Nebraska, for example, is one of them. You can have people with just 2 years of education, college, teaching the elementary schools, but come up with like a correspondent or Zoom or whatever you want to call it to get them trained so they can become full-time teachers. The other thing is we need to pay our school teachers as much as we do truck drivers. I did that 1 year. Laredo, Detroit 2 or 3 times a week, so we need to increase the pay. When I work with air traffic controllers, we trained them because they were real sharp, mentally IQ high people, but they couldn't work with their people enough, so we had to train them occupational managerial skills, telcel, consultant, join. Principals need to know how to treat their teachers.
April.
Well, I think this is a far more than a 1 minute response on this question, but certainly it's a multi-layered approach. We must continue to incentivize folks to go into teacher preparatory programs. We've seen a little bit of that this year in the legislature. We saw some scholarships pass and some opportunities there. The other piece of this is we have to continue to look at how do we get into our paraprofessionals and get them degrees as well. We had 5 this year in our district graduate through a special program that will now allow them to be certified teachers, and they're working that way. So it's absolutely a problem we have to work on. We've got to be focused on it. We need our own Teach for Oklahoma program. I've been meeting with some groups and working on how to start that. This is also going to be a large-scale marketing campaign that we have to do to restore the respect to the profession all across the state. And I think we've got to incentivize folks to stay in the profession. So increments of step 3, step 5, step 10, step 15 on the pay table. We've got to incentivize those with more money so that people want to stay in the profession longer as well. So again, a multi-layered approach. We've got to go after our young people as well, but too much to cover in 1 minute.
Ryan.
You know, we obviously know that parents matter so much in their kids' education, and we know inside the school setting there's nothing more important than having a quality teacher. And so that was why I was so excited to work with the legislature and the governor this year to pass a bill that will give teachers a pathway to make 6 figures and stay in the classroom. I've always thought it's absurd that the only pathway for teachers to make a lot more money and be involved in leadership positions in their school is to go become an administrator. I want our best and brightest to stay in the classroom. I want our best and brightest to be there to help provide supports for new teachers. As a public school teacher myself, those first few years, and I hear it from teachers all over the state, it can be isolating. You can have all of these type of issues where if you're not getting proper professional development, you're not provided the supports there to be successful, it can be the most difficult job in the world. So we've got to do what we can to make sure that our teachers are excited about getting in the profession. We need to give them career pathways where they can make more money, but also have a leadership role in the school so that they can be doing mentoring, co-teaching together, and team teaching. That is where we can really help support our teachers.
John?
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to those 3,500 that came out and are emergency certified. Without them, it would be a real crisis right now, but we're entering another crisis with 3,500 retiring, only 1,200 graduates taking their place. So we have a problem. And what I've been talking across the state is saying we need to raise the minimum salary schedule up to $50,000 minimum, because you can get a trade certification and make 50 or 60 right out of high school. So we have to entice the young people to come into our profession, but also have a graduated scale so that teachers who have been in it 3 years can get even more than 400 a year. They can get up to 1,000 a year, and do that every 3 to 6 years to keep them in it. The retirement system has to be looked at 90 and maybe possibly retiring at 56 and giving some incentive to stay, and then being able to hire them back full pay after they retire. I think that's just a great advantage to what we can do to keep our teachers.
Bill?
For 49, among the states, we don't have too far to go down. We need to figure out all the things we can, set up the committees, figure out how to train the people, and actually declare war on our educational system. And I don't mean like shooting people, right? I mean like fixing the things that need to be fixed. I used to sell encyclopedias on the streets of Los Angeles. We used to say the only thing worse than no education is a poor education, because you live with that all your life.
Dwayne?
Here lately, there's been a lot of focus on shootings and protecting classroom safety and from outside, external forces. How do you protect students from potential predators who have special access to students as a result of their position as a teacher, or administrator, or school staff?
Brian?
You know, I think we have to do more to ensure sexual predators are not in our schools. Parents should know that their kids are safe when they enter in our schools. We absolutely have to ensure that any administrator that suspects that there's any kind of sexual misconduct going on are turning those folks over to the police for them to be arrested and never be around a kid again the rest of their life. We have to ensure student safety in our school. This is the most vulnerable people in our population, our kids. We absolutely need to be doing more to make sure that there are no one with any type of troubled past of that nature get near our kids. And when that's found out in a school, that needs to be turned over to the police, and that person needs to be taken out of our school setting, and they need to be in prison. So we need to do more to ensure that our administrators are actively pursuing any type of sexual misconduct in our schools. There is nothing more important in our schools than student safety. So we must do more to ensure our students are safe in our schools.
John?
So lately we've been talking a lot about the shootings and protecting our kids from that, but also I've been talking about keeping the innocence of our children. And we have to do a great job of vetting employees that come into our school district. I think that's primary, and we have to trust when we make phone calls to other administrators that they're giving us straight advice about that person. Even with state law, even if you have a rumor, you're supposed to turn it in, you're supposed to call in, and it's not up to the school district to investigate it, it's up to the school district to turn it in, and regardless if there's any merit to it at all. So I think we need to make sure everyone across the state practices that, but it is so embarrassing and so degrading to see a small select group of people in our system that do these things to kids. And absolutely they should be arrested and they should be put in jail. So we just have to do a great job as the guardian of that gate to protect our children.
Bill?
Well, I think we need to monitor Twitter and the other things to see what these people say. Being biblical, it's kill, steal, and destroy. When I was at OU in the 70s, we even looked at computers at that time, could look for key words, and you could check out people. Nobody wants to be a snitch, for example, and tell on their friends if it's not true unless they don't like them. However, there are sometimes that might be necessary. Nobody does it in a prison unless you want to die, snitch on somebody. And again, in England, if somebody leaves a classroom, tears something up, well, when the teacher comes back, everybody points at them. That's probably the reason I don't have many guns in Britain. But my sister's cousin, my sister's kids went to school next to Columbine, got to play those kids, so I came up with ideas to stop that. One of them was books. And this happened at Fort Gibson, but it happened some other places too. Books, and the Daily Show I was on, can stop pistols. They can't really stop the AR-14s or machine guns, but they can slow it down.
April?
Absolutely, student safety is paramount. parents want to know when their kids come to school that they can be safe. So this is something we've got to continue to work on. We must make sure, as John mentioned, that administrators understand that there's something called can't pass the trash. Got to make sure that we're being transparent with one another when employees move. Also, there's reporting that's done to the State Department of Education along these lines when there is an issue. So we must continue to stay on top of this. There must be training. We've got to continue to vet employees. We've got to continue to move forward with the processes that have currently been in place with removing certifications for these individuals when these things come up. And we've got to stay on top of it and make sure that parents feel safe and that students feel safe in school. There's nothing more horrific than a kid being put in that kind of situation.
Jeannie?
The teacher walkout helped bring the teacher pay up to about 36th or 38th in the nation right now. But the National Center for Education Statistics last month found that Oklahoma is 46th in per pupil expenditure. And that reflects largely the resources in the classroom, the professional development that teachers have. I'm wondering if you are seeing the effect of that in classrooms, and how concerned are you about that? And as state superintendent, what do you do about that?
John?
So at our school, we have to be efficient with our money, because if we don't, we won't be around much longer. So that is something that we're focused on. I do see, I've been advocating, I think 4 years ago, we needed around $400 million to actually bring us stable in our schools, and the legislature stepped up and they've influxed around $200 million of money that's not tied to anything. And so I'm advocating now for additional $200 million to actually keep us level and give those supplies to our teachers that are much needed, and just take care of the business. With inflation like it is and bus gas going up over $5, there's going to be increased cost in everything that we do.
Bill?
Well, to me, the money is still misallocated. We're not a poor state. We're just a poorly managed state. We need to figure out where the money goes. Having worked in the state government for different times, they all have slush funds. They all have extra money, and I don't care if they're making barbecue sandwiches or what. We need to find out where it is. I don't know whether Cindy Bird can do that, but hopefully the Department of Education, the colleges and other ones can do that and put the money in the right place. Again, I think probably, in my opinion, we need a state bank to put the state money in so we can figure out how much money we have. And we always talk about the 10th Amendment 10th Amendment to the Constitution since 1965. If it's our money, we should keep it and spend it the way we want to. Local school boards spend it. If they have these sexual things on and it's pornography, that's not the standard of our society. We can wipe those out and get rid of them. The only place where pornography is standard is the industry of Southern California.
April?
So absolutely, teachers want resources in their classrooms, they want support, and part of what we have to do is continue to advocate for investments in education. We've got to see education as an investment, not just an expense. If we want to continue with workforce development, economic development, there's nothing better for economic development than education in our state. So we've got to continue to push for investment, and that's what I would do as state superintendent. In my school district, every single teacher starts out the year with a $250 classroom supply for their classroom individually. So they can start out the year, they can go get some of the things they need to start up without having to pay out of their own pocket. Some still will spend more than that $250, but at least it's a start. We've got to continue to do that. This year we saw the legislature give us a flat budget in education with an 8% inflation going on. So we know that those operational costs are going to continue to soar, which then creates problems for the resources to get to the classroom. We must continue to push investment in the classroom, instructional supplies, instructional materials, and training and support for teachers.
Ryan?
We have to make sure we're doing a better job of getting money to the classroom. That's why the governor and I called for an audit of the State Department of Education. That agency has never been audited before. This audit will show the state where funds are going, where the funds are coming in, and we have got to do a better job of ensuring those are getting to our teachers, that those are getting to the classroom. And one of the things that we've seen is a growth in administration across the state. We don't need as many administrators. We need a lot more support for our teachers. We need a lot more support for our students in the classroom. And that's one of the things that government does. Bureaucracies love to grow. So one of the things that I would do as state superintendent is ensure that this money, this investment of taxpayer dollars, is getting to our teachers, is getting to our classrooms, to ensure that it's being used on the folks that are actually working day to day with your kids, that are making the difference, that are truly inspiring students and getting to all those learning objectives. But we have to be more efficient with hard-earned taxpayers' dollars and ensuring that they're getting to the classroom where they need to go.
All right, we're going to come to our last question. Logan, you have it?
Sure. During the legislative session, state lawmakers proposed taking away charter sponsorship from the State Board of Education and giving it to a newly created board. Who should be sponsoring charter schools in Oklahoma?
Bill?
I think there are organizations that want charter schools because they're fed up with what the public schools are doing. Public schools, like Einstein used to say, if you do the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, you're not going to get it. I don't think we should do that. If it's like Epic, where does the money go? There has to be some kind of oversight on it. Even like up in here, some of your rivers and bridges that you all built in this area were built without legislative money being appropriated. People just did it. So there's some things that have gone on in the past. The Joint Conference Committee on Appropriations needs to check where all the money goes. The legislature is getting out of a session. I don't know if the governor's just looking at one topic. It used to be limited to one. So nobody should be punished because of what schools they should go to, so they have all the opportunities they can. And we need to look at more besides just chalkboards, TVs, the telephones, and the computers to figure out the best way to learn. We've done lots of good things in Oklahoma. Most of them were taken to the rest of the country. One of them was a real-time computer, better known as virtual reality, was developed at the University of Oklahoma.
April?
So one thing we definitely know that shouldn't happen with charter sponsorships is that they shouldn't be able to be sponsored by folks that are going to benefit in a for-profit manner. So we've got to make sure that the sponsorships that are approved are either through a board where it's either through the State Department of Education or its own board like it is now, but the state superintendent should probably be on that board. Someone should have representation. If the State Department of Education and the state superintendent are still going to be held to some level of accountability in making sure that funds are being expended appropriately and things like that, then the state superintendent needs to at least be a seat on that board to have a vote during that time. So I think it's important that we make sure that this is done in an equitable manner and that we're also looking at entities that get to sponsorship are not just for a for-profit perspective. And I think that's part of the problem we've seen in the past is too many loose hands in that. So I think tightening it down makes a lot of sense.
Ryan?
You know, parents know best for their kids. I want there to be more options for parents to send their kids to different schools. We have some high-performing charter schools in Oklahoma City area and Tulsa area specifically. And so, yeah, you know, there's an interest in getting more charter schools so that, again, parents can choose where their children go to school. Because, again, I trust a parent to make that decision a lot more than I trust a government bureaucrat. So I want the parents to be able to choose the education for their child. We have some high-performing charter schools. We have some high-performing public schools in those areas as well. And, again, charter schools are public schools. So charter schools have a lot of oversight. There is a lot of the same type of regulation that goes on with the charter schools. And so, you know, these charter schools, again, in the Oklahoma City and Tulsa area especially, we've seen some high-performing ones. So what we need to continue to do is to make sure no matter where you live in the state of Oklahoma, your children can get a high-quality education. Whether you're in a rural area, whether you're in an urban core, or whether you're in a suburban area, you need more empowerment in your kids' education, and that's what I'm going to continue to fight for, you, the parent, being in charge of your kids' school education.
John?
So for about 10 years, I've been talking about charter schools, and I see the need for, especially our urban and suburban areas, to have a choice for those children that come out of there. There must be a trust issue between the legislature and the governor to actually pull back the charter responsibility. As state superintendent, I want that responsibility because accountability is exactly what I've been talking about for 10 years. And as long as the money flows through there and goes to the appropriate, to where it's supposed to go and towards the child, and it's not being spent on people that own the company and making a for-profit entity, I think it's extremely important to keep charter schools out, but I want to be the one responsible for that. I want to be the one that assures our people of Oklahoma that the money is being spent where it's supposed to be spent, and it's spent towards the children that it's serving.
Okay, we're coming to our closing statements now. So you have 90 seconds for your closing statement, and we are starting with Ryan.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. This is one of the most important topics facing the state of Oklahoma, our kids' education. I believe Oklahoma can be a leader in education. I believe in parents. I believe in our high-quality teachers. But I believe we have to do more to empower parents. We have to keep far left indoctrination out of our classrooms. The Biden administration doesn't need to be dictating the state of Oklahoma what our schools look like. I will fight back against the Biden administration and ensure that our schools are reflective of our values, that our kids know that America is the greatest country in the history of the world. They study the history. They see our founding documents. They see the principles this country was founded on. If our kids don't know those founding principles, how are we going to continue to be a great country? We have to make sure that our kids know our history. We have to make sure that there's high expectations on our kids so that our kids can achieve greatness, whether that is a college route, whether that's going into workforce directly, whether that's going into a trade job, whatever that might be. We've got to open up opportunities for our kids inside our school system and realize in the way that we run our schools and the way that we run our state, every kid's different, every kid's unique. God created every kid unique and special, and they need to have all the options and opportunities in our education system. That's why I'm a champion for school choice as well. Parents out there, I want the best education system for your kids. I want it for my 4 little ones, but I want it for all 700,000 Oklahoma students. We can do this. We can be a leader in education for our kids. I am excited at the opportunity to work with you and make our education system the best it can be.
April, you're up.
Well, as I mentioned before, I'll just say I think it's time for us to reimagine, redesign, and redefine Oklahoma education. I think that means everything from teacher recruitment to retention to career development for students and those career pathways within high school to early college, high school options for our high school students. I believe we've got to begin looking past high school graduation for our high school students. At the same time, I think we've got to do a really robust job at getting back to the basics in our elementary schools. We've got to be intently focused on that. We've also got to reimagine our testing system. We've got to look at a growth model, look at performance in a different way. Our job is to challenge every student that is advanced, but it is also to advance every student that is challenged. That's the job of education, to move every student forward in the best way possible to meet their potential. That's what I want to do as your state superintendent. I have a 4-year-old granddaughter. She is the biggest part of the why for me as I'm running in this race, because I want to make sure that Oklahoma public education moving forward is an incredible system for her to go to school in. I want to make sure that she is ready for the future. And we can do that in education in Oklahoma. We've got to look at our educational outcomes and make sure what we want as a state. But I believe right now is the time. And as your 15th state superintendent, I'm going to be a champion for both students and parents every single day.
Bill?
Well, I think it's a big problem what we want to do. And I think as our state is starting to grow now, in case people hadn't noticed, the prices on, besides the inflation prices on food and stuff, on homes and things have gone up. So I like to identify things that are marketing. One of them is 3D housing. We need 100 million homes in this house and in this country. I was even telling the political people that, and then Big Bad Biden picked it up. So we also could use the dogs to sniff out the viruses, which like they did in Finland, and we wouldn't have to close everything down. The idea is to go in with the things that are needed. I'm not so sure whether students have to pay for their education or not at all. That happened somewhat at the University of California. But if they're going to be hired at a business, the business might want to get tax credits for that $30,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 that they've run up, unless Biden can get rid of all of them. I don't know what they're going to do with the students already paid theirs off. They keep calling me. I said, well, I owed $250, but I paid it off about 30 years ago. Why do you have my name on the list, right? So like I said, there were ideas that we've had here to make money. They don't all have to be college jobs, but it's nice. In McPherson, Kansas, there's a little 4-year school that teaches people how to totally repair cars, engines, bodies, and interior, and they make money. So there's some things in the VOTEX we need to do too. It needs one unified effort so the people who have education in that area pick out what they want.
John?
Experience has to matter. This is my 28th year of being a successful school superintendent. I know day one what to do for our kids when I get in there, to move away from this assessment system that makes no difference or makes no impact on a child, to move that to growth model, to protecting our children, to putting security guards in our schools, to focusing on what needs to be done in the classroom and keeping some of these ideologies out of the classroom and actually getting back to the basics of teaching again. I think we've lost that over the last few years, and I want to empower our teachers and parents to work together to just be able to have a classroom and teach. I think that's just so important and so basic. So back to the basics is extremely important. But we also need to empower our parents, like I said, and bring them back in and have them a part of their child's education. They need to know every single thing that their child is taught in a classroom, and it needs to be so transparent. And good teachers do that. We do that at our school. So I just want to be that person, your guardian at the gate that will protect your child and that will be there for them and just give them every opportunity to be the best that they can be and be who they want to be. Trade certifications, concurrent enrollment, all those things are so important to what we do. But I'm asking you for your vote. That's what I'm asking you for on June the 28th, and we need it. This is so pivotal to public education.
Well, that's it for the State Superintendent of Public Instruction's Republican Candidate Forum. Thank you to all of our candidates for being here today. I appreciate it, and I hope you were informed tonight. I want to thank our illustrious panel of journalists who asked those very important questions. But I also want to thank our broadcast partner, KGOU in Norman, for airing the program. I'm Royal Ailes. Good night. Now stay tuned, because coming up right after the break, we're going to have a quick roundtable and discuss everything that our candidates had to say. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right, welcome back. You just watched Oklahoma Votes 2022, the Republican Primary Candidate Forum for State Superintendent of Public Instruction. Now we're going to have a little round table, a little bit of discussion, and I'm joined by our good friends, Darren Gantz, who is a Republican consultant, and Alicia Andrews, who is the chair of the Oklahoma Democratic Party. Thank you both for being here. So let's talk a little bit about, as we had our debate or our forum with the 4 candidates who are running for this very important job with education in our state. What were your thoughts, just off the top? I'll start with you, Alicia.
It seemed to me like the Republican field has it all. You know, they have the independent thinkers, they have the folks who are aligned with the governor, and they have folks with great experience.
Mm-hmm. Aaron?
Wow. I think after looking at the polls, I see why the voters in the Republican side are where they're at. John Cox seems to come across as probably the rural candidate, highly educated, great experience, has done this before. It looks good, sounds good. People are more familiar with him. That's why he kind of leads in the pack. Ryan is robust and lively, and he has a lot of ideas that are different than what we've heard in the past. And April's new, but she's in the game, and so it's going to be a hard pick between those 3, I think, for Republican voters moving forward until we see more of who they are and what they believe.
So let's talk a little bit about what they believe. So the first question out of the box was about funding. And of course, Ryan, Mr. Walters, wants an audit off the top of the day one. Alicia, your thoughts about their ideas on funding?
I think that it's important that we know where the money's going and where the money's coming from. I think that the bragging about the first time of the audit and all of that is just a bunch of empty words. But I liked the 2 candidates who are currently superintendents. I liked to hear their experience. I think it's everyone's guess what's going to happen, because none of it sounded concrete to me.
Do you think that with Ryan being the secretary, sits on I don't want to say board, but sits with the governor,
He's in the cabinet.
on the cabinet, you think that has a little more weight here for him? Or really is it a superintendent's job to have?
I think it's a superintendent's job to have. I think that Ryan was very clear in wanting people to believe that he has the leg up because of that, but I think it's the superintendent's job to have.
What about you? What do you think?
First of all, I like the idea of having elections, and the people have the most say when they get to vote. I understand that, and Bill, I didn't realize Bill and his family had something to do with actually getting that Secretary of Education position. So I learned something about him today that I didn't know before. And go back to your original question, will it have any impact? It has impact because he automatically has some star power, if you will. He gets some media attention because he works for the governor and his cabinet. I don't think he's always been on everything lined up with the governor, so that's got him some attention. But go back to Linda Murphy. She was the Secretary of Education under Governor Keating, and it got her really close to the finish line, I think within less than 1,000 votes. So it could give you some leg up.
So Alicia, you're running the Democratic Party. So what do you think it's going to take to have that job? What are the voters, what should they be looking for?
I think that the voters should be looking for experience. They should be looking for someone who is close to the issue, and someone who actually cares about what's happening with our students, not about who has the flashiest tagline, not who's friends with whom, but who has actual experience, who's close to the kids, and who has access to information from outside of the state as well, because we need more input for what's going on, because our education system is in trouble in Oklahoma.
Well, with Walters, he's at battle with the national platform. I mean, he's totally at war with the national agenda. Is that something is that going to carry the message in Delaware County?
To some degree, I think it does. And the reason I think it does is a lot of Republican primary voters are upset with the way education works, and that he kept saying a lot of buzzwords I hear in Republican circles is that parents do not feel like they have a say. He wants more input. He wants them to be more empowered. I've heard some of that from candidate Cox as well. John Cox said some of that as well. And that's good for him. You said experience. He has that experience card that you talked about, and he has that administration card. It was over 20 years experience. I go back to something I believe Ryan said about 3 times. He said the governor had called for an audit back in September of all public schools. I actually agree with that. I think they should be audited. If we audit private entities or charter schools, they should be as well, or audited as well. And Ryan he came across saying what I'm hearing a lot of voters say in the Republican circles is they want the audits of the public schools. They want more empowerment. But I also heard John Cox say that, and he has the experience that could put him over the top as well. And I think you also have the rural flavor. And if you win rural Oklahoma, you probably win this election and a lot of statewide elections as well. And so as Delaware County, I think the debate question came up of, well, I think you asked it, how do you tell somebody in Delaware County that they have a choice? They're going to have to drive a ways unless they have a charter school online choice.
I think he was surprised by that question because in his mind, well, it is equitable. But if you are from rural Oklahoma,
if you're not
it's
from
not.
Tulsa or Oklahoma City, you do not have a choice. Well, there are a couple of others, but you really don't have a choice. And so to say that you do is false, and it's misleading.
Well, I don't know. I don't mean to interrupt. Pardon me for doing that. I don't know if that's totally true because I do have rural friends who are or have been with EPIC charter schools. There was over 60,000 children that were part of that in last year. This year, I believe it's dropped to 40 or 20, something in that neighborhood, because of people going back to school. Maybe in some respects, some kids that I know had learning disabilities, were behind, they got caught up, and then went right back to public schools to finish their high school. So they do have a choice. The question is whether or not.
Well, no, they don't, because in rural Oklahoma, you don't have high-speed internet. And charter and EPIC is all about internet.
Well,
so how do you solve that problem?
All. Yeah,
how do you solve that problem?
Well, first of all, I don't know that we should use EPIC as a benchmark for anything until we get that whole issue resolved. But I do think that it's misleading to imply that there's a choice. If you live in a community that doesn't have high-speed internet, does it make sense that you're sitting in the parking lot of McDonald's to get your internet? It's not equitable, and I think that rural voters deserve as much as urban voters, and Tulsa and Oklahoma City are covered. But if you live in Delaware County or you live down in Atoka, you don't have the choice. You don't have the choice, and I think it's disingenuous to even act like it's. And I think that parents know that they don't have a choice unless they're willing to drive an hour and a half to school every day or something like that. I think parents know.
Well, the next topic that had everybody's passion was school safety. It's on everyone's mind right now.
Absolutely.
And all of them agree, let's have more cops on campus. What do you think about that?
I grew up in a school, and I graduated a long time ago, where we actually did have a local police department. Our police department in Sapulpa, Oklahoma, we had a resource officer. And I think communities need to be looking at how do we fund that and make that a priority. All doors were always locked. We talked in the green room about this as we were watching it. There are ways we need to secure the classroom. We need to secure buildings. My son went to a school where you couldn't get in or out of a building without having a barcode on a card. They knew who every person was coming and going. Security with cameras. People who had guns didn't know who had guns, but they were trained. And we talked about that earlier too outside, was that schools need to have people who are really trained with firearms and know what to do.
Well, Alicia, John wants a guard at every door, and Ryan wants a teacher to have a gun.
So if I had to pick, I would go with Mr. Cox and the security at every school, the 1,776 schools that he cited. I am really opposed to having teachers and employees having guns at school, at least if we, because we just learned in Uvalde that doesn't necessarily work. And additionally, I think that there should be some requirements. There are schools now, according to Ms. Grace, that there are schools that have folks who have guns. But I didn't hear that there are any requirements for training, any requirements for qualifications. And so I wouldn't feel safe with my kid at that school knowing that there are random people who have guns. And we learned in Uvalde that folks with guns doesn't necessarily keep kids safe.
Well, you go into liability issues, because if a teacher flees because they're afraid for their life, are they held accountable because they had a gun? Why did you leave? Why didn't you stand up against the shooter? So you're getting into a lot of legal issues. And does a teacher, are they being forced to carry a weapon? You can only teach you if you carry a weapon. You're going to go into those spaces as well. So do you think maybe the gun at every door might be the best option?
It could be at certain schools, but not every school may not be a necessity. I also see the legality and the insurance side of it from those who have gun-free zones and their people are unprotected. So do those people's families, if they lose their life, do they not have a lawsuit against the school or a hospital or whatever it is, because you said you can't have a gun here? And where I may have been able to protect my life, my family's life, or other people nearby.
May I add just one more thing? I don't understand why we have to skip from wide open schools to someone with a gun. Why can't we secure the schools? Why isn't that interim step? I just think that we're speeding right along to arming schools, and that's not the only way for schools to be safe.
Well, for a lot of school districts, the resource officer comes either from the local police department or the sheriff's department. And we all know how the counties are funded. You go to Cherokee County, you go to any county out west, they barely have enough officers to drive the county and protect the county. So you're getting into who's going to pay for it.
I would just say on that note that if it were my choice, if I was a superintendent, and I would hope that they would feel this way too, because we're talking about kids here. We're also talking about adults who are maybe there without a gun. I would like to see a real law enforcement officer, I'm not to say a security guard's not, but someone who's been through CLEAT training, who's been maybe through hostage negotiation training, continuing education, to be there in the building if possible. But on that note, I also know that law enforcement agencies are having a hard time recruiting and retaining the quality employees that they want also. So that makes it difficult.
So the next big deal is paying for new teachers. You've got, John said it earlier, you're 3,500 retiring, 1,200 coming in. You're in trouble. Do the math. So Alicia, how do we solve this problem?
Well, so the legislature made some progress in this cycle in the scholarships for new students and the little stipend if they stay. And so that's one thing. It's a little late, but it is a start. And we're going to have to pay teachers more. Texas last week had a a hiring fest where they invited Oklahoma teachers to come talk to them so they could hire them away. And they're not having to pay them a whole lot more. they're providing opportunity, they're providing a pathway to real earning power, which folks don't necessarily want to leave here. People who live in Oklahoma on purpose. And if we paid them to stay, if we gave them just a little bit of an incentive to stay with just common sense pay, maybe we wouldn't be losing them to surrounding states.
On that same note, I heard, I think more than one candidate say they wanted to pay teachers $100,000 a year. I think there were 3 candidates. I wonder how far that goes, because I don't remember the exact numbers, because that's a huge amount of money that we're talking about paying these teachers. And then if you're going to pay them $100, well, superintendents in many cases make more than $100 now. So how much are we talking about adding on to the payroll? But not just that same thing, but we're also talking about that for police departments as well. How much is enough? Well, it's just not enough, and with inflation, we have a real crisis. We need more population and we need more taxpayers. That's what I think.
But I think there's a big gap between the 38 starting and 100,000. And it's, again, why do we jump to the extreme every time? There's some interim steps that I think we could consider.
Well, thank you both for being a part of this. I appreciate the dissection of the comments that were made tonight. We all know this election for the State Superintendent of Public Instruction is one of the most important ones in our state government, because it does carry a lot of weight downstream to the schools, whether they're in Tulsa, Oklahoma City, or Atoka, or Concord. It doesn't really matter. It goes downstream. Don't you think?
I think it does, and I think it affects economic development of our state.
Absolutely does, and I just want to thank the candidates for having the courage to fight and get in the fight and keep fighting, because they obviously all care about this job or they wouldn't be running for it. And Rogers State should be commended for having this, because I don't hear this going on anywhere else. So, and you did a great job. The whole program was great. I think we both agree. Y'all did a great job here.
Well, I'll pat myself on the back.
You did good.
Alicia, thank you for being here.
Thank you for
Darren,
having me.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching, everyone. I'm Royal Ailes, General Manager of RSU Public Television. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.